What up, it is Marcus, Dynasty Football Dads. We're going to be going through the 10 tips and tricks of Dynasty Fantasy Football and Fantasy Football in general to make you a better fantasy football player. We're going to be going through some Houston camp news that was super unfortunate tomorrow and some updated rookie stuff. I believe we're going to just all kind of do that in one video tomorrow. And so most of this actually came from Dynasty Nerds. They created an article here, and I really like Dynasty Nerds. If you don't follow their channel or listen to them on iTunes, I highly suggest it. They also have a really good Dynasty GM tool that I have been using. I just think that if you support other Dynasty channels that you've been invested in or that you feel like give good content, they are one that gives really good content there. So these are the 10 tips and tricks that they said. I'm going to be expanding on my opinion on if these are good tips and tricks or actually if they should be altered. So the first one is do not be the team who starts a player on Thursday Night Football that you would normally not start on Sundays, which is true. There's a lot of people that want to get the first points out of the gate. They want those. There's reasons to start players on Thursday over Sunday. There's a reason if let's say a Sunday player is really, really questionable, then you might have to pick a player that unfortunately might be a little bit less caliber if you need to be safe. If you want to be risky, of course, you always have to have a backup plan. Especially if let's say you have a player that's Sunday night, might be questionable, and really your only other option is the player that plays on Thursday. You might have to play the player on Thursday or find another pickup. In Dynasty, it's much easier because Dynasty has these huge long rosters, but finding people off the waiver wire can definitely happen. It happened even once or twice this last year where a potential second or third string was on the waiver and I picked him up just in case. Whether it's the Miami fourth string running back or whether it's the San Francisco fourth string running back or whoever it might be, like there might be a player out there that gets pulled up from the practice squad and we've never even heard of him before and he ends up starting or playing a significant portion of a game. So the one thing I will say on this tip and trick is Thursday night players can affect your Sunday roster. And what I mean by that is if you have a player that does not perform well, I think that it can help because Sunday you can make a boom or bust type of player. If I lose at 1 or 50, that's both a loss for me. But if I have a player that underperforms on Thursday, I can then put a Sunday player that is more risky, more boom or bust. Chase Claypool, my favorite guy was Deshaun Jackson because it was like 2 points or 100 points. That's what it seemed like Deshaun Jackson got. And so Thursday type of players can affect your Sunday roster if you have some guys that are boom or bust, or maybe you just need safety. You need the 5 catches for 50 yards. You need a Hunter Renfrow. You need a Cole Beasley. You just need safety. You need the guy that's going to, not this year Cole Beasley, because Cole Beasley does not have a team, right? So that is something I will say and expand on that tip or trick. Number 2, do not forget Thursday night players out of their flex spots. Now that I've been in a part of a lot of leagues, I almost have to do this every Thursday, like 20 minutes before game time. I have to do 20 minutes because I have that many leagues I got to go through on all these different platforms and be like, do I have anybody that's playing Thursday? And there's always a time or two where I always think I have it, and then I check 20 minutes prior and I'm like, oh, that's right, this person does play on Thursday Night Football. Or Saturday games or London games. These London games are one of the biggest things because London, let's say you have a London game that you know is a Sunday morning, switch that player out of the flex position so it gives you some more freedom just in case last minute injuries happen or a player goes through walkthrough, gets hurt, or something COVID happens. I mean, there's players that get COVID right at the last second. So with all the different fluctuant things, I always say take the players out of the flex position. There's no honor in having them in the flex spot. And I've seen plenty of teams absolutely burned. And I go, why didn't you put that player in the flex? Why didn't you take him out of the flex and put him in your running back position? Now you could have started that receiver in that flex position. Instead, you're now stuck at a crappy running back because they have to put it in your RB2 because you didn't take that RB out of the flex. So, number 3, do not be the team who never checks on trade inbox. I have email notifications that come into that they were turned off at one point in one of the platforms I use, which teams are like, hey, are you getting my trades? Are you getting them? I was like, I am not. I did not get a notification. So make sure your notifications are on. And worst case scenario is sometimes I'll put in like the comment box in some different forms or in a text message and say, hey, are we close on this? We're like, no, not really. Or like a team wanted 105 and 111 for 101. And I was like, nah, I'm not really interested in trading the 101 unless I get like 102 and something pretty significant after that, like 102, 105. Because I think Breece Hall is the big fish basically in this small pond. So I think that is sometimes just nice to be like, hey, like no. And there's teams I will not even offer trades to. I think the trade would even potentially benefit their team, but they're just either a hassle to deal with, which is for another time, or B, they just never check and respond. So I am sending messages out there and they just never respond. I could send them 1,000 first for Kirk Cousins and they would still not respond. They just refuse to respond, and just randomly once in a blue moon you'll see them go through a trade and you're like, well, what in the heck? In fact, we had a team do that, and we actually threatened to kick them out of the league if they were not going to respond to trades. And finally, they respond. They just respond, no. And I'm like, thank you for at least responding no. Because at least no means, okay, we're not close. I'll move on. I won't even think about it, or rescind the trade, or whatever it needs to be done. Number 4, do not be the team who makes trades to make trades. Honestly, this is probably one of my biggest weaknesses that I did earlier on, is I was a team that just got bored and I just want to make trades to make trades. I actually have a really good roster. I have an amazing roster in one of my leagues, my Dynasty leagues, and I want to fiddle with it. The roster's been the same for the last umpteen months, and I just want to fiddle with it. I want to play with it. I want new players on my team. I just want to fix it, and there's nothing you really need to be fixed. But I'm almost even thinking like, oh, I'm like the number 1 contending team. What if I trade Mike Evans for this and that? And it's like, I don't need to do that. So why am I fiddling? Like, I just don't. I've seen teams that make trades to make trades just because they need to be active and they need something to do. Honestly, sometimes that is what can actually be a downfall of a team. I've seen a team that was really good all turn into a team because they were bored and they just wanted to make trades and they were trying to be a little bit risky, and so it happened. So number 5, do not be the team who gives up on their season falling out of contention. This is for Dynasty or redraft. I mean, the most important, the reason you miss storylines at that second half of the year is what I'm trying to say. I was one of those fantasy players 15 years ago that once my team was out, I'm done for the season. All right, cool. I only had one team 15 years ago. Now I have a million different teams, it seems like. So the biggest thing that I noticed is when I started looking at the last half of the season storylines, the storylines I was missing, the Rashad Penny and Devin Singletary storylines, which now James Cook is a part of that roster, but what players were starting to heat up? Lots of rookies were starting to heat up. Of course, other players were starting to heat up as well, and so, or what players were starting to dwindle. I mean, what players started to, like Cordell Patterson, started to really cool off the last 3-4 weeks. Does that translate into 2022? Does it not? At least you know. I mean, for if you quit, you'd think Cordell Patterson is like a top 2 running back, not minus his age, but you look at the last couple of weeks and you go, oh, maybe is this what's going to be transpiring forward? Is it not? So I think really you have to make sure that you pay attention throughout the entire year. And continue, especially if you're in Dynasty. I mean, you're looking at how can I make myself better for the future years. When you immediately are out of playoff contention, let's say you're just a complete rebuild and you only are part of a couple leagues, still make sure that you're not just going straight into 2023 rookies, or if the next year 2024 rookies. It's like you're constantly at least looking at the rosters now, because there's still values to be had with players that are non-rookies. Number 6, do not be the team that takes part of collusion. I mean, that's just an obvious one. Just don't do it. I mean, I don't understand teams that try to fiddle the system or break the system and stuff like that. It's just don't do it. You either get kicked out of the league or you have to kick somebody out of the league. It's a mess. Please don't do it. It's frustrating. And people stealing money, I see that all the time on all these different like Discords and stuff like that. People are like, they stole my money. They stole all the league fees. And I'm like, oh my goodness, not again. Do not be the team that overvalues a player just because you roster them in other leagues. This is another one that I feel like it has to be said multiple times. And a lot of times is why I have to, look back at my Dynasty rankings. Because honestly, when I start falling in love with the player, DJ Moore, I love DJ Moore a year or two ago, right after his second half of his rookie blow up, which is another reason why I paid attention, because I saw DJ Moore heating up. I want him before his sophomore year, and boom, all of a sudden sophomore year picked up, and it's somebody that I really, really liked as a player, and so I always wanted DJ Moore. I want to keep him. And so sometimes you overvalue somebody that you've had for so long, and you're like, man, this is like the best wide receiver. I don't want him for anybody else. But you have to kind of look at you almost have to make your own rankings or find out rankings that coincides with you the most. I think honestly that's going to be it's a difficult process because there are times, and you know the person that if you let's say you have Kirk Cousins in Superflex. Now, if you were offered a first, you're not taking it, but then you'll offer the other person a second, say you should take it. It's like there are plenty of teams, and I have some definite leagues that I have multiple owners in a couple different leagues. They'll offer me a trade, and it's funny because there's a couple of teams that do this, and I do this almost as a joke because they'll offer me just a ridiculous trade. They'll offer me 3 seconds for Russell Wilson in Superflex or something like that, and I will go to the other league and offer them that trade. Or offer them a first in 2 seconds. Be like, hey, you know that trade that you offered me? I'm offering you better than what you offered me. You should take this because according to I should take the other one. And it's funny, it gets declined all the time, but I can be guilty as well of being a little bit of this, who overvaluates players just because they've been on my roster for so long. And sometimes you just love a player. I have a buddy who loves Mike Evans, and Mike Evans is the wide receiver one, true and true to his heart. I mean, yeah, he would trade him for Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and stuff, but likely other people, he's not going to be trading him much. I just lost my spot. So there's just, if I had Adrian Peterson in his prime, I'm not really going to be trading him. Randy Moss in his prime, I'm not going to be trading him either if I had him in Dynasty because I'm a Vikings fan, and sometimes you just want to have that player, which leads me into number 8, which is do not be the team who overlooks more talented players and to draft players on your favorite teams. I will say that you should. Fantasy football is fun. I love rooting for my own players. If it's close, I'm probably going to take the Viking. It really is. There's sometimes that I don't like having players on my own team. Like sometimes I don't like having Dalvin Cook because I can root for other players and I can root for my own team, my Dalvin Cook. It just hurts when he plays against me twice a year, once a year, whatever it might be in fantasy football or dynasty fantasy football. So I do think that I tend to, it depends on the roster and stuff, but I mean, sometimes I like my players, certain players, but yeah, talented players. Don't overlook talented players. Like, let's say Jonathan Taylor and Dalvin Cook. It's like, I'm taking Jonathan Taylor over Dalvin Cook in any format. Fantasy football, dynasty, fantasy football. Like, you can't just way over dramatic. There's always a team, and you always know who it is. It's a Pittsburgh fan, and you trade him a Pittsburgh player. We have a Jaguar fan in one of our leagues. We had teams are drafting Travis Etienne and Trevor Lawrence just so they knew they could get a higher price of trade to that one team, and it was just funny because that's just how we just know. We had a Vikings guy who it was Viking after Viking after Viking. You look at his roster and it was entire Vikings, and there's a Packer guy that he was drafting. Every Packer tight end, and I think every Packer tight end bust that you could possibly think of, and he was drafting Rodgers, which was always a good pick, but he was overdrafting and redraft, especially Rodgers. Like, I got to get him first. It was a battle. I got to get him. It was him and another person that were Packer fans, and everyone else was Vikings fans. Anyways, number 9. Do not be the team that overreacts to week 1, and I'm going to put a / beginning quarter of the season. The first 4 weeks of the season, lots of things can happen, but do not overreact to that. In fact, be the one that can actually find those overreactions and be able to find trade value. If let's say DJ Moore comes out guns a-blazing with Baker Mayfield, and I can get a higher trade value in 4 weeks into the season versus now, I'm going to make that trade because I know that people and players they can overreact. All of a sudden, you have 1 or 2 good games, and you see, oh my goodness, this running back has 150 yards or 130 yard average and a touchdown average in the first 4 weeks. And it's like, well, yeah, he had 2 really good games and 2 bad games. The 2 really good games ended up being against defenses that were piss poor and had ginormous holes. We saw rushing defenses like that the last couple of years where it's like you saw the team A and you could just have a backup and they would run for 120 yards. And then you realize, you start to extrapolate that over the season. And good defenses shut down some of these players. Bad defenses, they still let up the fantasy points galore to some of these running backs. So do not overreact to week 1. Do not overreact to the first 4 weeks. There's always Mike Williams. It was a huge overreaction of, oh my goodness, this guy is going to be a top 5 dynasty wide receiver. I actually heard from one podcast. He turned from this is his ginormous breakout, and look what he did the last half of the year. It wasn't amazing. I mean, but then you have Cooper Kupp, who we thought might be an overreaction, and he ended up continuing on. So there's been 8 million different probably experiences of that. Number 10, do not be the team that takes the beautiful game too seriously. This ultimately, fantasy football is supposed to be fun, and I have to keep reminding myself too. We have tons of rules, and sometimes I just have to be like, all right, fantasy football is fun. We want to do it with family and friends and coworkers and whatever it might be. Fantasy football is supposed to be fun, and so ultimately we want it to be fun, and we want to encourage positivity. And I've had people kicked out of leagues for being super negative. I've had also people kicked out of leagues for collusion. I've had people kicked out of leagues for just being a complete dick at times, and I've had people want to leave leagues because other teams were being rude and stuff like that. And so right now we have a great 12 people in our including myself in our Dynasty Dad League, and plenty of my other leagues too. I would say most of the time it's positive. We actually have a commissioner in one league. He's a co-commissioner with another person, and he's always a pain in the royal behind. But we all love the other 15 of us, really enjoy each other, and so we just kind of deal with that one person. But again, he's the team that takes the beautiful game too seriously, and was somebody that we were in a league, and there was a specific trade around a player that he really wanted and thought he had a better offer for, and that team didn't respond to him, and he got all mad and wanted his money back. And it's like, whoa, we're in Dynasty, like, just calm down. And it just made this huge fit over it, and then we had to have those owners talk, and it was like, really? Like, we are all grown adults. Like, if somebody doesn't want to make a move with you that you even think is better, just because you think it's better does not mean the owner think it's better. I mean, there's plenty of varying opinions. Because I think Garrett Wilson is better than Chris Olave does not mean everybody thinks Garrett Wilson is better than Chris Olave. Some people might say Chris Olave is better than Garrett Wilson, and you might find that one owner that says that. And so if I offer, let's say, Garrett Wilson for somebody, and somebody else offers Chris Olave, and they accept Chris Olave, I'd be like, whoa, what the heck? I have the better offer. But in that owner's mind, I have the worse offer. So we just have to remember this is a beautiful game. Please do not take it too seriously, and thank you for just continuing to watch my videos. I mean, we made it 17 minutes. This is one of the longest ones I think I've done in a while. So this is Marcus with Dynasty Fun Dads. Peace out. We'll see you again tomorrow.